Oh, open the gallery doors, please. Order. We'll begin the daily routine. Presenting and reading of petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I'm giving this notice on behalf of the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, I give notice on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 2 prominent Canadians joined 836 students this past Saturday receiving degrees from the Maritime's largest university, and whereas Andrew McKay, former chair of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, currently serving as the Justice of the Federal Court of Canada, and William Reid Morden, president of Reid Morden Associates, were both granted honorary degrees from Dalhousie University, and whereas students receiving degrees from the Departments of Education, Planning, Computer Science, Engineering, Health Professions, Physical and Life Sciences, Arts and Social Sciences, Management, Dentistry, Law and Medicine, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating William Reid Morden, Andrew McKay, and all the new Dalhousie University graduates, and wish them much success in their future endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Waiver was requested. Agreed. Everyone, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Farm Business Advisory Service is a national program that will address the needs of Nova Scotia producers considering new opportunities for their farm business and provide them with access to business planning services. And whereas as of October 9, 2003, Nova Scotia farmers have access to the Canadian Farm Business Advisory Service program, and whereas through these advisory services, the sector will become stronger, more competitive, and more profitable in markets in Nova Scotia as well as abroad. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize Nova Scotia's support through the Canadian Farm Business Advisory Service to ensure a successful and competitive agriculture industry in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver was requested. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas October 20th to 26th is Waste Reduction Week in Nova Scotia, And whereas the passenger automobile is one of the leading causes of poor air quality and resource depletion, and whereas using an alternate form of transportation like bus, bicycle, or just walking one day a week can reduce commuter traffic and vehicle emissions by 20%, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House commit to using an alternate to the passenger automobile whenever possible as a sign that a cleaner environment is possible through personal effort. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver was requested. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Member 2 First Nation of Sydney, Nova Scotia was recently named the winner of the 2003 Economic Developer of the Year Business Community Award by the Council for the Advancement of Native Development Officers at their 10th Annual National Conference in Whitehorse, and whereas Member 2 is the first Indigenous government in the world to achieve ISO 9001-2000 certification, which places them firmly in the international marketplace, and whereas Member 2 Technologies Incorporated recently entered into a memorandum of understanding with Fujitsu Consulting of Canada, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Chief Terrence Paul, Chief Executive Officer of the Member 2 Corporate Division, Mr. Byrne Christmas, and recognize the Member 2 First Nation as a model of how innovative thinking leads to success and economic development. And I respectfully request waiver of notice, Mr. Speaker.
Waiver was requested. Do you agree? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I give this on behalf of the Minister of Education. Speaker, I give notice on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas The Scientist magazine has ranked Dalhousie University as providing the best environment for research outside the United States, and whereas the government has contributed to that positive environment by investing nearly $4 million from the Nova Scotia Research and Innovative Trust Fund to buy equipment for Dalhousie researchers, and whereas students benefit as much from this investment as our research community does, since they gain access to the equipment and to bright scientific minds this university has attracted. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Dalhousie and its researchers on their success in creating the right climate for research and for learning. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Waiver was requested. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis on an introduction.
For the House to give a warm welcome to a friend of mine from Digby, Mrs. Blanche Keats. She's been a great friend of mine for years, and a very strong and great person in our community. And I'd like to for the House to give her a warm welcome, please.
And indeed, welcome to all the members in our gallery today. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, to enable the further restriction of the use of diesel engine enhanced braking systems.
The member for Halifax Fairview begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, to enable the further restriction of the use of diesel engines enhanced braking systems.
Bill 24, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293, the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, to enable the further restriction of the use of diesel engine enhanced braking systems.
I order this bill be read a second time on a future date. Notice this motion. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
House Leader.
Honourable House Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Gemini Awards, recognizing the best in Canadian television arts, were handed out last night in Toronto. Whereas the Trailer Park Boys, television cult hit produced most recently in Eastern Passage after its various stints in Sackville, North End, Dartmouth, and Timberley. Whereas Mike Smith, a.k.a. Bubbles, received the Gemini Viewer's Choice Award for Best Comedian in a Television Series at last night's awards. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Mike Smith for his award, in which the producers, crew, and actors on Trailer Park Boys' future success as they wrap up their 4th year of production. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Waiver was requested. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas psoriasis is a common skin condition that affects more than 1 million people in Canada and 80 million people throughout the world, and whereas October is Psoriasis Month, also held the National Psoriasis Walk on Sunday, October 19th, and whereas Judy Meisner, a resident of Halifax Clayton Park, formed the Psoriasis Society of Canada in 1983, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge Judy Meisner as the founder of the Psoriasis Society of Canada on its 20th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver was requested. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Shelburne doctor is now seeing patients in Lockport 1 day a week, and whereas the Shelburne County Community Health Board has already submitted a proposal to the District Health Authority for a health clinic within the town of Lockport boundaries, and whereas the town of Lockport already owns a building that could become such a clinic. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs in the House of Assembly commend the vision of members of the Shelburne Community Health Board and wish them every success in staffing and planning a clinic in Lockport. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Waiver is requested. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, if any? Carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas there are numerous constituents in Dartmouth East and around the province that suffered losses due to Hurricane Juan, including loss of food, and whereas many of these people have been able to access the local food banks, but unfortunately they cannot afford to purchase meat with their limited funds. And whereas many of these same people fall into the category of the working poor and therefore do not receive social assistance, therefore be it resolved that the Department of Community Services make funds available immediately to the working poor so that they can go out and purchase the food necessary to provide themselves and their families with a healthy diet. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and notice of passage without debate.
I hear nays. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 2 studies published in the October issue of the Canadian Journal of Cardiology show that death rates are directly linked to smoking, inactivity, income levels, and whereas these studies reinforce the need for the Nova Scotia government to demonstrate its conviction in understanding why Nova Scotians, according to these studies, continue to be among the least healthy Canadians. And whereas it is vital that this government remember its role in alleviating these health burdens by bringing about changes in healthy living that will positively impact our productivity and our economy. Therefore, be it resolved, Nova Scotia's Conservative government must ensure that health promotion and health prevention remain priorities and don't get lost in the economic concerns of the budget. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver has been requested. Is it agreed? I hear nays. Motion tabled. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, read this resolution on behalf of the Honourable Member from Pictou East. Mr. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 2 Pictou County women will spend 3-week vacation helping orphans in an impoverished European country, and whereas Sue Harrington and Lisa Mason will travel to Romania in February to care for orphan babies in a severely understaffed and underfunded hospital, and whereas Miss Harrington and Miss Mason will be responsible for the feeding, changing, bathing, and entertaining 35 children under the age of 2 at a clinic in the Tuvova Hospital. That's Tuvova. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House commend Sue Harrington and Lisa Mason for their commitment to helping orphans in Romania and extend to them our best wishes as they participate in this worthwhile endeavor. Mr. Speaker, request waiver.
Waiver is agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
No,
Shabukto, Halifax Shabukto.
that's fine. Just to add to that, I'm presenting this resolution on behalf of my colleague, the honourable member for Halifax Needham, and I'll be seeking waiver. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ms. Sheila Mackenzie at the fall convocation of Mount St. Vincent University on October 19, 2003, received the degree of Doctor of Human Letters honoris causa. And whereas Ms. Mackenzie has been active as a filmmaker for over 30 years and has been responsible for films honouring and recognising the history and accomplishments of women and of Acadian, African, Nova Scotian and Aboriginal communities, and whereas Ms. Mackenzie has contributed to the cultural life of Nova Scotia and Canada in ways too numerous to list, therefore be it resolved that this House congratulate Sheila Mackenzie on the occasion of receiving the honorary degree of Doctor of Human Letters. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas David Colville and Shirley Elliott, both from Wolfville, received the Order of Nova Scotia today, and whereas Mr. Colville, who as an artist and teacher challenged the public consciousness through his paintings, and as a teacher inspired young artists and encouraged them to pursue their goals, and whereas due to Miss Elliott's efforts as legislative librarian, much of Nova Scotia's history has been preserved and documented for future generations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate David Alexander Colville and Shirley Burnham Elliott on receiving this year's Order of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
It's agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas staff and management at Shoppers Drug Mart in Barrington and Yarmouth are tireless fundraising for the IWK Health Centre, and whereas Yarmouth store manager Lyle Conway volunteered to have his head shaved if the 2 stores were able to raise $6,000 between them. And whereas with the help of the generous residents of Yarmouth and Barrington, staff of the 2 stores were able to raise more than $7,000. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the staff and management of the Shoppers Drug Mart stores in Yarmouth and Barrington on their successful fundraising efforts, and thank Mr. Conway for putting his head on the line for a good cause. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and notice.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? If any? Carried. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas football is a popular sport throughout Nova Scotia, whereas the Timberley Titans Football Club continues to attract athletes to the sport of football, and whereas the Titans are establishing a great tradition on and off the field, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Timberley Titans football coaches, players, and supporters. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Bretoners had a reduction in staff at the Sydney Cabinet Office, and whereas one position was removed from the office, leaving one person left to hear the concerns of Cape Bretoners in the province's 2nd largest municipality. And whereas Cape Breton has 20% of the province's population but less than 10% of the provincial civil service, Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House encourage the government to address Cape Breton concerns such as depopulation. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
I hear nays. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Cape. Honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Well, thank you. Thank you kindly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Halifax Regional Police Service has embarked on a new venture by opening a community police office in District 9, and whereas Constable Christopher Chris Fries, a well-known Dartmouth officer, has been named the community constable, and whereas Constable Fries has already made an impact in the community by introducing himself to all the agencies, organizations, and residents in District 9 and assuring them that every issue will receive the utmost attention. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly congratulate the Halifax Regional Policing Services and Constable Christopher Chris Fries on a proactive measure of policing that will lead to safer communities. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Digby
Annapolis. Sorry, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a Digby Neck fish plant burned to the ground last Sunday, and whereas Scotia Fisheries Limited, owned and operated by Alan Walker and son Brian in Little River, began to burn in the early morning, causing damage to surrounding fish plants and boats. And whereas fire departments from Barton, Digby, Tiverton, and Freeport helped fight the early morning fire. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House acknowledge the loss of Alan and Brian Walker and the hard work, the dedication provided by the volunteer firefighters of Digby County. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bedore Lake Stewardship Society is working with a committee of mayors, wardens, and chiefs to establish a long-term plan for total sewage and contaminant removal from the lake, and whereas one of the major goals, short-term goals of the society is to designate the Bedore Lakes as a no-discharge zone for marine sewage, and whereas the membership in the society has been very strong, and for the third year in a row the society received more than $10,000 in membership subscriptions, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House recognize the dedication of Pat Bates and all the members of the Bedore Lake Stewardship Society for their efforts to preserve one of the province's treasures and the world's largest inland sea. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this week HRM, police, and Mounties will be concentrating on areas where school buses stop, and whereas this is part of a special campaign during School Bus Safety Week, and whereas School Bus Safety Week is designed to raise awareness of the danger of illegally passing school buses, therefore be it resolved that this House remind people that it is illegal to pass a school bus when its red lights are flashing, and commend the HRM, police, and Mounties for their efforts to raise public awareness about the importance of stopping for school buses. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas students from Sydney Academy cleaned up at the Nova Scotia Impromptu Debating Championships held Saturday in Dartmouth, and whereas Sheldon McCormick and Mark Brister won the team title in the senior high division, and whereas Mark also won the individual senior high category and was one of 2 students selected to represent the province at the National Public Speaking Tournament to be held in Winnipeg in February, therefore be it resolved that all members congratulate Sheldon McCormick, Mark Brister, and all the students from Sydney Academy on their success at this year's Nova Scotia Impromptu Debating Championships, and I would ask for waiver of notice, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas members of a committee trying to restore a fountain at the old burial ground in Liverpool have begun their fundraising efforts, and whereas the old burial ground was Liverpool's first cemetery and the fountain is considered an essential part of this historic cemetery, and whereas Owen Hamlin and his fellow committee members have been given until next June to raise more than $35,000 by the Region of Queens, who is restoring the old burial ground site, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House recognize the efforts of Mr. Owen Hamlin and his fellow committee members who are raising money to save the fountain in Liverpool's old burial grounds and wish them much success in this endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the craft shops along the Prospect Road from Goodwood to Westover held their annual craft crawl on Saturday and Sunday, October 18th and 19th, whereas the operators and owners of these craft shops provide valuable service in our community, whereas this craft crawl is well received by all involved. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate the craft shops along the Prospect Road on their annual craft crawl. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Orders of the day, oral questions put by members. Time is 11. Oh, the Government House Leader.
I move that the House do recess for a period of 10 minutes. I think we have a problem down at Government House with the Order of Nova Scotia presentations. So okay. If we can adjourn till 11:45.
Is it agreed? Agreed. Okay. House is adjourned.
Order, please. We'll call the House back into session. Question period will begin at 12:31, and at 1:31, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health. Last week, parents of autistic children visited this House and brought with them a petition containing over 4,000 signatures, asking that this province provide their children with applied behavioral analysis, or ABA. Now, over the decades of scientific study and practical application, ABA has proven to help thousands of children reach their potential. But despite the facts about ABA, the minister told this House and the parents who are sinking deeply into debt to supply the badly needed medical service for their children that he feels the issue needs more study. He said that he had a committee looking at best practices before deciding whether to cover ABA. The existence of this committee was certainly a surprise to me, and I believe a surprise to the parents. Right. My question to the minister is this: will he commit today to table the terms of reference for the committee he's talking about so we can all see just exactly what they're actually doing?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The work of the group that is involved in this will be making a report to me, I believe, before the end of this calendar year, and at that time, of course, we in the department will be moving with respect to analyzing the results, and among other things, ABA is one of the methods that is being assessed, but it is far more far-ranging than that in terms of looking at all practices and the best practices, both nationally and internationally.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was, would he table the terms of reference? That's right. That one goes unanswered. Last week, when the minister was busy trying to confuse the autism issue by casting doubt on the effectiveness of ABA, did he know that his government took delivery of a report in the year 2000 that specifically recommends ABA as the preferred treatment for autism? It's called the Kayak Report, and it says that children who receive ABA, and I quote, had significantly greater improvements. And I'm going to table the appropriate page of that report, Mr. Speaker. It's a report drawn up by some of the top people in health, education, and community services in this province. So my question to the Minister of Health is, why are you choosing to ignore the report done for your government that specifically recommends ABA as the preferred therapy?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The work that is being undertaken within the department and also through consultation with the chair on autism at Dow is evaluating all work and everything that's available, including the report to which the honourable member referred.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is nothing more than delay and obfuscation. The minister just doesn't want to deal with the facts when they're staring him right in the face. The facts are that ABA has over 50 years of scientific proof behind it. ABA is the accepted treatment in virtually every other province in the country. ABA is the treatment recommended by a report done for this government by some of the best people in the field. A report that says, and I quote, "There are no other methods of intervention that have strong enough evidence to support them as a primary method of intervention for children with autism." The facts are in. The minister is stalling. My question is this: when are you going to face the facts and offer children with autism the proven treatment they need to reach their potential?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, as I indicated in answer to an earlier question, we will be receiving the report, which will do a complete analysis of all information available, and when that is available and assessed, then we will, of course, be moving forward with programs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everyone in the House will recall that on September 19th, when this government came forward and announced that there would be $32 million worth of cuts to this budget, The Minister of Finance went to great pains to suggest to Nova Scotians that these cuts would not be happening to public education and to frontline health care. My question for the Minister of Finance is whether or not today in the House he will commit to no cuts happening to frontline health care and to public education in this province.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member is quite correct. When we announced that we were going to be looking for opportunities within our budget, what we are still asking departments to do is look at opportunities. We've received some suggestions from them. We're expecting more. But, Mr. Speaker, what we said is moving forward. It still stands.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that doesn't sound like the unequivocal "we will not provide cuts to frontline health care and public education" that the minister provided back on September 19th. Now, I'm going to suggest, Mr. Speaker, that just this past week, a document was tabled before Cabinet called the Performance Management Plan. And in that document, it contemplated cuts to public education and to the frontline health care in this province. I asked the Minister of Finance, will he confirm that the Performance Management Plan exists and put it before the House as soon as possible?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What I can confirm is that we've asked departments to look at opportunities. We are getting some of those in. We expect more. Some have come in. We've sent some back. We're looking at those, Mr. Speaker, and at this point in time, we are looking at those opportunities. And when those are finalized, then we'll be able to make it available.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For my first question and my first supplementary, I would ask for the Minister of Finance to confirm that he is now indeed contemplating cuts to public education and to frontline health care, contrary to what he suggested on September 19th.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will repeat, as I said before, we've asked departments to look at areas, look at those areas where they can, we have some opportunities, and we're bringing those in. Mr. Speaker, until we make decisions, until those are finalized, there is nothing for me to table it yet. We will do that when we're finalized.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Environment and Labour. Through you. Yesterday in this House, Mr. Speaker, the Minister spoke of how the government would work with all parties to develop regulations during law amendments and so on, Mr. Speaker. These regulations will enable the creation of a process that will support workers with chronic pain, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Minister praised injured workers for their patience since the Dorsey report's been released. Indeed, they should be praised since Bill 90, which really put them there, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Minister, how will you guarantee that injured workers will be treated as full partners in the development of regulations around chronic pain? How will you do that?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly will be listening to injured workers and individuals who have comments to make, and we'll be working with the other two parties to draft up the regulations, and I'm sure through that process that voices will be heard.
Member Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, these are words that injured workers have heard before. We all know regulations, Mr. Speaker, are easily changed by the government of the day with the stroke of a pen behind closed doors, Mr. Speaker, and should be clearly and openly vetted, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the Minister, when will the Minister provide this House with his government's draft of regulations regarding chronic pain?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly will provide that copy when it's developed, when the parties get together and develop the draft regulations.
Now, Member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, injured workers have suffered long enough in this province, Mr. Speaker, through government bungling and indeed bungling by the board itself, Mr. Speaker. This is a great week to start it, Mr. Speaker. This is August 20th to 26th is Canada's Healthy Workplace Week, Mr. Speaker. One of the goals is to promote a comprehensive and integrated approach to workplace health and safety, Mr. Speaker. So is it the minister's plan, since he's have said that he will remove the responsibility for encouragement of educational programs to promote occupational health and safety from the Occupational Health and Safety Division. So, Minister, is it your plan to privatize that important function or to simply do away with it altogether?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
We certainly don't intend to privatize that operation, and it's my opinion that it will work well, will be augmented by its new home, and that we will see a reduction in accidents throughout the province, which is the goal of this legislature.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, the challenges facing the district health authorities are great. The challenges facing Capital District Health, for example, are great. My question is for the Minister of Finance. Given that Nova Scotia provides less money per capita for health care services than any province in this country, and that wait list backlogs are great, would he confirm that Capital District Health Authority has been asked to cut $10 million from its global budget?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And what the honourable member didn't mention is that the fact that this year in the budget we've given health care and the district health boards future funding at 7%. In September, we provided additional money to the health boards because we knew there was some pressure. Mr. Speaker, that's what's called supporting the district health authorities.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that sounds like a yes. We're going to provide cuts of $10 million to Capital District Health, and I'd remind the Minister of Finance that in this last budget, $140 million was added to the health budget, but about 120 of it came from the federal government. Only 20 million came from this government. My question is for the Minister of Health. Given the answer that we got from the Minister of Finance, will the Minister of Health confirm that Capital District Health has been asked to trim $10 million from its global budget?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member raises a very significant point, and it's about time that the federal government started paying more money to health care.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party in your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I suspect that the federal government would have more comfort if it found that when it sent the money to top up what was already supplied by the provincial government, then they would be confident that the money was going into health services and not off to some other tax scheme that was premature and irresponsible. The question for the Minister of Health, which was not answered, Mr. Speaker, is will he confirm that $10 million is being cut from Capital District Health's global budget?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as has been indicated by the Honourable Minister of Finance, we have in fact increased the budgets of the health authorities in this province by 7%. We have given them a long-term commitment with respect to that funding. We have in fact, Mr. Speaker, increased over and above the 7% an additional amount of money to account for increased costs relative to overtime and costs relative to aging population. That, Mr. Speaker, translates into increased funding, not cuts.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for the Insurance Act. In New Brunswick, insurance companies failed to reduce rates even after a $2,500 cap on pain and suffering awards was imposed. That has prompted the New Brunswick Liberals to come out strongly behind a public auto insurance plan. Mr. Speaker, in spite of New Brunswick's failure, the Liberals and Conservatives in Nova Scotia continue to bicker in the back rooms over how many injured Nova Scotians will have their rights limited in order to pad the profitability of insurers. My question to the Minister, for how long has it been government policy to proceed with an auto insurance plan that we know won't work?
Order, please. My interpretation is that's a question that's directly related to the bills before the House. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was about government policy. Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick Liberal leader Sean Graham says it's time for public auto. Quote, "Our position in the Liberal Party is very clear. The insurance companies have had their opportunity. The time has come and passed. It's an issue of making a decision on who you want to represent, the insurance companies or the people." My question to the Minister, in a debate where one can be on the side of the insurance companies or the people, why has this government and the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia come out so clearly on the side of the insurance companies?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour. Sorry, the Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to advise the honourable member opposite that the plan that we've put forward comes down firmly on the side of consumers of this province. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, that the consumers of this province will realize a saving of $100 million in the next 12 months, starting November 1 of this year.
Now, member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, one thing we know for sure, and that is that the lowest and fairest auto insurance rates in the country are in the provinces with public auto insurance. Mr. Speaker, across the country, political leaders of all stripes are agreeing that public auto is the answer, and that includes Liberal leaders in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, and now New Brunswick. My question to the minister, when is this government and the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia going to join us in the fight for the lowest and fairest auto rates and deliver public auto to the people of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not responsible for what the Liberals think about public insurance, but I do know, Mr. Speaker, what happened in New Brunswick to the party that was out there calling for a public insurance. Mr. Speaker, they got one seat.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Fraser Institute released its 13th annual Waiting Your Turn document, which is one of the most extensive wait time documents produced in this country, and it's certainly the only guide that we have here in this province as to what's happening in health care as it pertains to wait times. One of the areas that stands out in wait times is orthopedic, Mr. Speaker. From referral from a general practitioner until treatment, wait times for orthopedic surgery have increased by 9 weeks, almost 2 months over last year's. For the record, Mr. Speaker, according to the Fraser Institute, Nova Scotians are waiting 11 months for orthopedic surgery. My question to the Minister, could the Minister please explain why he has allowed orthopedic surgery wait times to get so long in this province?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
I want to thank the member, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say to the House through you that we, in fact, recognize the need to address the wait time issue. That's why we in this province have a working group which is actively addressing this. They will be coming forward with recommendations to myself and to Cabinet, and that will take place this year, Mr. Speaker. And we will have far more detailed and up-to-date information than is provided by the Fraser Institute.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, let's not blame it on a working committee whose report isn't done yet. The minister is the person who's ultimately responsible for what's happening with wait times. This government has failed to manage health care, and the health of Nova Scotians is suffering as a result. And now, with global cuts coming to health care and pressures being placed on this government to balance the budget next year, and that's despite, Mr. Speaker, that $147 million tax scheme. So those statistics are going to continue to worsen. Elective cardiovascular surgery has increased by 10 weeks, more than 2 months in this province, Mr. Minister. My question, Mr. Speaker, how does the minister expect district health authorities, for instance the Capital District, to improve on wait times when you are going to cut $10 million from their budget?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I again welcome the opportunity to remind the House, and I do so through you, that we have in fact increased funding to the district health authorities in this province by 7%. We again recognize that there were pressures that required an additional $19.2 million this year that we have made available to the district health authorities. That, Mr. Speaker, again, does not translate into a cut. It translates into increased funding.
Fort Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, let's deal with the truth here. Most of, if not all of that is federal money, and the minister knows that. The minister knows that. What is happening in health care in this province is truly frightening, Mr. Speaker. The government for 4 years in its last mandate refused to release any information on wait times, and for good reason, Mr. Speaker, because things are not good in this province. My final question to the minister: in light of the wait time statistics, will the minister please confirm then that there's not going to be any budget reductions, for instance, in cancer care in this province as a result of this government's mismanagement?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member referenced the truth of the information I provided to the House. The truth is we have increased funding by 7%. We have added an additional $19 million, Mr. Speaker, to health care funding in this province. And if some of that is federal dollars, it's high time that we had additional federal dollars.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Halifax Shabakdal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Economic Development.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Shabakdal has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the people of Centre Lee in the Annapolis Valley are apprehensive about the future of their community. The town's largest employer, Britex, has been placed in receivership with KPMG. Residents fear that the 90 existing jobs may be in jeopardy if a buyer is not found. After extensive negotiations with a potential buyer, Nuco, failed, employees stepped forward to propose the establishment of an employee-owned co-op. Instead, KPMG has moved ahead with a public tender process that is likely to take 2 to 3 months. Mr. Speaker, will the minister tell this House what communication, if any, he has had with the employee group and what the results of those discussions has been?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, through you to the honourable member, as everyone in Nova Scotia well knows, Britex is an extremely important employer to the community of Bridgetown. That being said, they encountered financial difficulties with their main funder, NSBI. Subsequently, they were placed in receivership, and currently KPMG, the receiver, is considering all offers to continue, for the operation to continue. And certainly the employers group is one of the offers I understand that is being considered.
The honourable member for Halifax Shabakdal on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the employees aren't just promising status quo operations. They've said that they believe they can not only save the plant's existing 90 jobs, but return it to employing over 200 people under their co-op plan. The government, through NSBI, ran out its own time clock negotiating with Nuco towards a deal they knew would really not come together. Nuco was apparently given some funding to develop their business plan, while employees have been given nothing. Mr. Speaker, will the minister tell this House why the employee group with a proven commitment to their business and their community were not given a preferred opportunity to purchase Britex assets and establish a co-op?
The honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. And as through you, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member is well aware of, Nova Scotia Business Inc. Is the main supplier of capital to Britex. They were not meeting their commitments. A receiver was appointed, and that receiver is considering all offers. And certainly, we have encouraged the employee group to put forward their offer in this process, and it will receive the same consideration as any other group or individual that wishes to purchase the assets and continue the company.
The honourable member for Halifax Shabakdal on your final supplementary.
Here's the problem, Mr. Speaker. The longer the public tender process takes, the more there is uncertainty. Employee representatives have been told by the receivers that no matter how soon they get their proposal in, it won't even be looked at until more proposals arrive from other potential purchasers. But almost any international business that might be interested would probably just take the assets away and shut the business down. So knowing this, then, why will the minister not do the right thing and ensure that the employee group is given first opportunity to purchase the company's assets and establish a co-op?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly I hope the honourable member across the floor is not suggesting that a fair and open, honest process is not followed through this receivership.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for the Policy and Treasury Board. In May 2000, Nova Scotians were advised by the Premier himself of the formation of the Red Tape Task Force. That task force, Mr. Speaker, was lauded by the Premier as a means to make government operate more efficiently. My question for the Minister is this: does the final report of the Red Tape Task Force exist? And if so, why has it not been tabled? And would the Minister be willing to table it in the House before the end of business today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the honourable member's question. The answer to that I'll have to take under advisement. I can tell you that I am certainly aware of the Red Tape Reduction Task Force and the valuable work it did on behalf of Nova Scotians.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since 2001, the task force on red tape appears to have been all but forgotten, and the answer is quite clear from our minister of today. It's not completed its mandate, and it's not been held accountable in any way. My question again for the minister is this: did the government pull the plug on the Red Tape Task Force before it completed its mandate, and if so, why?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, the honourable member. The task force that was composed of members of this House and ultimately members of this House are accountable to people in Nova Scotia, first of all. And second of all, our government has implemented a number of those items from the Red Tape Reduction Task Force. We as a government are very committed to reduce the amount of red tape Nova Scotians are burdened with.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians have every right to an explanation of the expenditure of their money on what appears to have been little more than a boondoggle. My question is this: would the minister table in this House, by the end of business today, a complete accounting for the Red Tape Task Force, specifically salaries, advertising costs, travel expenses, office expenses, as well as costs associated with the writing, designing, and printing of 2 interim reports and the missing final report? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much. It's sometimes difficult to take the honourable member's questions seriously when you ask a question. By the end of business today, provide an accounting, Mr. Speaker. That does not really look like a very realistic request. The second thing is, Mr. Speaker, we have to be aware of the fact that is a work in progress, and the government is continuing to look at implementing the recommendations of the task force.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Former employees of the Dartmouth Marine Slips have been treated unfairly, Mr. Speaker, by their employer and by this government. In June of 2000, about 100 workers were laid off. Many of these men had worked at the shipyards for more than 20 years, and they have never received severance. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister is this: what will it take for you and your government to investigate this matter and ensure that these men receive the severance that they're entitled to?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for the question. It's not something I'm fully aware of, so it's something that I will take under advisement and get some information. Thank you.